Right, so before we even start, let me ask you something. When was the last time a future King of England told a sitting Prime Minister to politely do one? Yeah, that is what I thought. Never, until now. Prince William, the usually composed, perfectly dressed, diplomatically trained heir to the throne, has just done the unthinkable. He has rejected a direct request from Keir Starmer. Not a suggestion, not a casual mention over tea, a formal request from number 10 Downing Street. And the fallout? Absolute constitutional chaos. We are talking emergency meetings, furious briefings, palace insiders leaking like a broken tap, and political analysts losing their minds on live television. This is not your grandmother's royal drama. This is a full-blown institutional crisis, and it is happening right now. Quick favor, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers have not yet. It is free, takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show. So let us rewind a bit. Picture this. It is a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in Westminster. Keir Starmer is probably sipping his fourth coffee of the day, preparing for Prime Minister's questions, when suddenly his private secretary walks in with a face like someone just told him the crown jewels have gone missing. There has been a development, a constitutional development, the kind that makes your blood pressure spike and your media team start drafting emergency statements. Because somewhere across London, in the polished halls of Kensington Palace, Prince William has just said no. Not maybe, not we shall see, just no. And that, my friends, is where this story gets properly mental. Now, what exactly did Keir Starmer ask for? Well, according to multiple sources, some anonymous, some not so much, the Prime Minister requested that Prince William temporarily pause certain royal duties. Specifically, high-profile engagements that might overlap with sensitive political negotiations happening behind closed doors. The reasoning? Optics, timing, the delicate balance between Crown and Parliament. You know, the usual constitutional tightrope walk that keeps this country from descending into complete anarchy. But here is the thing, the palace did not just decline politely, they pushed back. Hard. Kensington Palace released a statement, carefully worded but absolutely dripping with passive-aggressive royal fury, calling the request, quote, a political matter that does not concern the constitutional role of the Prince of Wales. Translation? Cheers for the suggestion, Prime Minister, but we will be doing exactly what we were already planning to do. And this is where things get spicy, because the palace does not usually issue statements like that. The royal family thrives on diplomacy, neutrality, and keeping their mouths shut when politicians start throwing tantrums. But this was a public rebuttal, a line drawn in the sand, a constitutional middle finger wrapped in silk and delivered by courier. And the reaction? Absolute pandemonium. Political Twitter exploded. Newsrooms went into overdrive. Constitutional experts were dragged out of retirement to explain what on earth just happened. Because in modern Britain, the monarchy does not openly defy the government. They smile, they wave, they stay neutral, they do not pick fights with number 10. Except apparently, they just did. So why did William say no? What could possibly be important enough to risk this kind of public showdown? Well, according to palace insiders, and there are quite a few of them talking right now, William sees this as a matter of principle. The monarchy, in his view, does not take political instructions. Full stop. The moment you start letting the government dictate your schedule, you stop being above politics and start being part of it. And that, according to constitutional tradition, is a very dangerous slope, because the entire point of the monarchy, the reason it still exists in 2025, is that it represents continuity, stability, and neutrality. The second you lose that, you are just another political football getting kicked around Westminster. And William, it seems, is not having it. But here is where it gets even more complicated. Because Keir Starmer is not some random backbencher causing trouble. He is the Prime Minister, the head of the elected government, the person who, in theory, has the constitutional authority to advise the Crown on pretty much everything. And when the Prime Minister advises, the monarchy traditionally listens. That is how the system works. That is how it has always worked. Except this time, it did not work. And now everyone is scrambling to figure out what happens next. Because there is no rule book for this. There is no constitutional precedent that says what to do when the future king tells the Prime Minister to jog on. We are in uncharted territory here, and it is absolutely glorious. Let us talk about the fallout. Within hours of the palace statement, Downing Street issued its own response. Carefully worded, obviously, because you cannot exactly accuse the royal family of insubordination without sounding like a complete lunatic. But the message was clear. The government expects full cooperation from all public institutions, including the monarchy. Translation? "Get back in your lane, William." But the palace was not backing down. Senior royal aides, speaking on condition of anonymity, because of course they are, described the Prime Minister's request as overstepping. One source, reportedly close to William himself, said that the prince felt blindsided by the request and saw it as an attempt to use the monarchy for political cover. And honestly, that is not a bad read, because if the government is asking the royals to step back during sensitive negotiations, it is probably because those negotiations are going terribly and they do not want the optics of a smiling prince shaking hands while the country burns. And then the leaks started. Oh, the leaks. Beautiful, chaotic, utterly unverifiable leaks. One source claimed that there were emergency calls between palace officials and senior civil servants. Another claimed that William personally phoned a cabinet minister to express his displeasure. A third, and this one is my personal favorite, claimed that someone in number 10 referred to the prince as, quote, dangerously principled. Which, let us be honest, is probably the most backhanded compliment you could give a future king. But the leaks also revealed something more serious. This was not just a one-off disagreement. This was the culmination of months of tension between the palace and the government. Tension over protocol. Tension over public appearances. Tension over who gets to decide what the royal family does and when they do it. And now, it has exploded into public view. So what does this mean for the monarchy? Well, according to some royal commentators, this is the most dangerous moment the institution has faced since the abdication crisis. And before you roll your eyes, hear me out. Because the abdication was about a king choosing love over duty, this is about a future king choosing constitutional independence over political convenience. And that is a much bigger deal. Because if the monarchy starts openly defying the government, even on principle, it raises serious questions about where the real power lies. Is the crown truly above politics, or is it just another institution that can be pushed around by whoever happens to be in number 10? And if the answer is the latter, then what is the point of having a monarchy at all? But here is the twist. Some people are actually backing William. Not just royalists or Daily Mail commenters, but serious constitutional scholars who argue that he is right. That the monarchy's entire legitimacy depends on staying out of political games. That if Keir Starmer wanted a cooperative royal family, he should not have made a request that was so obviously political. Because the moment the royals start acting like government employees, they lose the one thing that makes them valuable. Their neutrality, their ability to stand above the chaos and represent something bigger than the latest election cycle. And William, it seems, understands that. Meanwhile, back at Downing Street, Keir Starmer is reportedly furious. Not publicly, of course. Publicly, he is all smiles and diplomatic language. But privately, sources describe tense meetings, raised voices, and a prime minister who feels like he has been publicly embarrassed by a man who is not even king yet. Because this is not just about protocol. This is about power. This is about whether the elected government has the authority to guide the monarchy, or whether the monarchy can just ignore them and do whatever it wants. And right now, no one knows the answer. And then there is the public reaction. Social media has, predictably, lost its mind. Some people are calling William a hero, a defender of constitutional tradition, a future king who will not be pushed around by politicians. Others are calling him arrogant, out of touch, a privileged royal who thinks he is above the elected government. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. But the fact that we are even having this debate is significant. Because for decades, the royal family has been able to avoid this kind of controversy. They have stayed neutral, stayed quiet, and stayed out of trouble. But now, with William at the helm, that is changing. And whether that is a good thing or a disaster waiting to happen depends entirely on who you ask. So where does this leave us? Well, as of right now, the standoff continues. William has not backed down. Starmer has not apologized. The palace and Downing Street are still issuing carefully worded statements that basically say nothing while sounding incredibly official, and the rest of us are left watching this constitutional car crash unfold in real time. Because here is the thing, this is not going away. This is not some minor disagreement that will be forgotten by next week. This is a fundamental clash over power, authority, and the future of the British Constitution, and it is only just beginning. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that senior royals are rallying around William, that King Charles, despite his own historically close relationship with politicians, supports his son's decision, that the palace is preparing for a prolonged battle if necessary, and on the other side, there are whispers that Downing Street is considering its options, legal options, constitutional options, options that could fundamentally change the relationship between Crown and Parliament. Because if the government cannot advise the monarchy, if the future king can just ignore the prime minister, then what is the point of the constitutional framework we have spent centuries building? And then there is the final leak, the one that changes everything. According to sources, and again, take this with a massive grain of salt, there is a document, a memo, a set of notes from a private meeting between palace officials and senior civil servants. And in that document, allegedly, is a line that has sent shockwaves through Westminster. A line that suggests this was not just about one request. This was about establishing a precedent, about testing whether the monarchy would bend. And William, it seems, decided it would not. So here we are, a constitutional crisis in slow motion, a future king who has drawn a line, a prime minister who has been publicly defied, and a nation watching to see who blinks first. Because one thing is certain, this is not over. Not even close. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you in the next one.